back to Inner Peace Better Health, your weekly dose of purpose, clarity, and inspired living. I'm your host, Saima, and today's guest is Scott Maderer, founder of Inspired Stewardship and author of Inspired Living. Assemble the puzzle of your calling. After nearly 3 decades in education, Scott and his wife Carrie now coach Christian men and couples to align their time, talent, and treasures so they can live a life of true calling, not just busy schedules. If you're feeling like your life is full but not fulfilled, this conversation is your compass. Now, Scott, your work centers around aligning time, talent, and treasure. So, why do these 3 pillars matter so much in finding inner peace and purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. The truth is really I kind of play a trick on people because it's actually only one pillar. And I'll explain what I mean. So usually what
Hmm.
happens is people come thinking, okay, I've got a problem with time, I've got a problem with money. They say things like, I don't have enough time to do the things that I need to do, or I don't have enough money to do the things that I need to do. I make a high income at my corporate job. I really wish I could start my own business or something. They have dreams, they have things that God has put on their heart that they're supposed to do, but they feel like time and money is holding them back. Here's the trick. The truth is you usually don't have a time problem and you don't have a money problem, you have a you problem. The problem and the solution is usually staring at you in the mirror. And so I tell people, they come for help with time and money, and then at the end of the day what we work on is talent, because it's how you think about the world, it's how you implement the world, it's the habits you have, it's the systems you have. That's what allows you to align your time and your money with what you really want, so that you can end up living out what God has put on your heart to do. So at the end of the day, those pillars of stewardship really are all about us and how we relate to the resources that we've been given, whether that's time, whether that's money, whether that's something else.
Mm-hmm. So, which of those 3 do people tend to struggle with the most and why?
At the end of the day, different people will struggle with different things, but most folks come in, usually it's the money area that they start in, or that they feel like they've got the biggest problem in, or they've got things holding them back in. And I think a lot of that is because we're immersed in a culture and in a world where a lot of the focus is on looking good, consuming. It's about putting out this picture of prosperity and making sure that the fake it till you make it kind of mentality of, if I wear the right clothes, if I drive the right car, if I live in the right house, if I have the right trappings, then somehow or another I'm successful. And yet at the end of the day, people don't feel like they're successful. They don't feel like they're actually living out authentically what they're supposed to be doing. They feel held back, they feel challenged, they feel frustrated, and all of these things. And so at the end of the day, stepping back and really looking at your money, how you're spending it, what you're using it for, what are your actual priorities, what are your actual values, not just what other people are doing or keeping up with the Joneses, but what is truly on your heart for you, for your family, that kind of thing. And doing that hard work, and it's easy to say, things like spend less than you make, pay off debt, these sorts of things are easy to say. The problem is that they're not easy to do. And that's where accountability and, having systems and processes and tools and building new habits, that's where that supports that. Because at the end of the day, it's not the concept that's hard, it's the execution that's challenging.
Oh, Scott, that's such a powerful framework. It's like building a life from the inside out, not the
Mhm,
outside in, right?
mhm, exactly. So many of us are surrounded by, all of the messages that we hear are about, if you look this way, if you buy this thing, if you shop here, this is what's going to give you joy. And a lot of times it does give you a momentary little happiness. It gives you that little jolt of dopamine in your brain where it's like, ooh, I feel good because I bought something new, or because I look in a certain way. The problem is that doesn't last. Real joy, real contentment comes from aligning those sorts of things with your actual deeper inner values, your inner priorities, your inner desires, your inner calling. And when you are able to do that, then you actually find contentment. And it's funny because then no matter how much you have, or no matter how much you don't have, you still have that deeper feeling of contentment and joy because it's no longer about the stuff. It's no longer about the trappings. It's actually about that internal feeling.
I completely agree with that. Now, you work with people to help them leave their calling. So, for someone unsure of what their calling is, where do they even begin?
So I've got a couple of things that people can do, but before I actually share those exercises, let's kind of define, at least for me, what I mean when I say calling, because I think sometimes we get it confused with our career. So the word calling really, we actually have a word in English that a lot of times you hear people use and treat it the same as our career, and that's vocation. So they'll use the word career or job and vocation interchangeably. They actually mean different things. They come from different roots or different meanings. A career actually comes from the word for cart, and it means something that gets you from point A to point B. It's something you do to get somewhere. Where a vocation comes from the same word as vocalization. That's actually the word that we would use for calling. And by definition, a calling comes from something bigger than you or something outside of you. I'm a person of faith, so I put it in the framework of that. But again, it really doesn't matter what framework you use. It's the idea that a vocation is something deeper or more meaningful or bigger than just what you do to get from point A to point B. And so your calling isn't just what you do at a particular moment. I call those things your assignments. So you'll have a lot of different roles or assignments in your life. You may be a father, you may be a mother, you may be a spouse, you may be a son or a daughter, you may be a friend, you may be a person that works at a particular job. Those are all roles or assignments. Your calling is kind of that deeper passion or feeling that runs underneath that. So if you've got no idea when I say that, it's like, okay, great, that's all good in theory, but how do I kind of start to find that deeper passion that lies underneath it? So I'm going to give you two exercises. One is a looking back exercise, the other is a looking forward exercise. So the looking back exercise first, sit down and just start writing down the left hand side of a piece of paper everything that you've done in your life. And I don't just mean jobs here, I mean things that you've done. So it could be babysitting the neighbor's kid, it could be spending time with your dog, it could be going to camp in the summer. I don't care what it is. It could be your jobs too, but also include things that aren't necessarily things that paid you money. And when you look at those things, put them down the left hand side and then put two columns. In the first column, as you look at each of those activities, write down things about that activity that you loved, things that you enjoyed while you were doing it, the things that brought you joy while you were doing it, the things that when you did it, you lost track of time, those sorts of things, the activities that were associated with that thing that brought you joy. And then in the last column, for each of those activities, write down the things about that activity that you didn't enjoy, the things that drained energy from you, the things that felt like oh, that's the part of this that I just have to get through it. It's the work part. It doesn't bring me joy or happiness. It's just sort of there. And as you write that down and begin to brainstorm, and this is one of those activities where it's really good to spend quite a while on it and do it over several days. Don't just sit down and do it in one setting, but spend some time with it, because then you can begin to look for patterns. You can begin to look for things that keep showing up. And you'll notice that they may be put in slightly different words, but there will be things that show up over and over again in the joy column. And there will be things that show up over and over again in the don't like column. And what that's giving you is a sense of what is it that aligns with your gifting? What is it that aligns with who you are and how you're meant to be operating? So the next one is a looking forward activity. So this one is, I set it in the future. So imagine for a moment that it's 5 years from today. It's 5 years in the future. And you've been on a trip and you're flying back and you got that layover in the middle. So you leave one airport, you land in another airport, you change planes, and then you fly on home. And as you land and you get off the plane and you're walking to the gate, here it is 5 years in the future. And right as you get to the gate, you look up and sure enough, there's those dreaded words, flight delayed. You're like, oh, great. How long is it going to be? And it turns
Mhm.
out you've now got a 4 hour magical layover that you weren't planning on having. And you're stuck in this airport halfway between home and where you were on vacation for 4 hours. So you do what anyone does when they're stuck in an airport for 4 or 5 hours with nowhere to go. You go find a restaurant or a bar to have a drink or something to eat, right? And as you're walking into the restaurant looking for a place to eat in a quiet corner, so maybe you can rest your eyes for a little while, you look up and there's a friend that you haven't seen for the last 5 years. You lost track of them 5 years ago. They've moved away, you got busy, they got busy, and you really haven't talked much over the last 5 years. And they look up and they're like, hey, so great to see you. Do you got, are you here for long? And you're like, well, I'm stuck here for a few hours. So are they. So you grab a quiet corner in the middle of the, corner of the restaurant where it's kind of quiet, y'all can talk, and you decide to spend a couple of hours catching up. So here it is 5 years in the future, and your friend looks at you and says, so how have the last 5 years been? I've lost track of you. I haven't seen you. And you say, you know what? This has been the best 5 years of my life. And at that point, your job is to write what comes after because. This has been the best 5 years of my life because dot, dot, dot. Fill in the dot, dot, dot. Tell the story. Tell me what would be true about your career. What would be true about your relationships? What would be true about your finances? What would be true about your spiritual walk? What would be true about all of the different components of your life? What would it look like in 5 years if you could answer honestly and say, this has been the best 5 years of my life? Write all of that down. And again, this is one of those things to spend some time on. And between those two activities, when you start to kind of overlay them, you'll start to see patterns of things that show up over and over again. The looking forward activity kind of gives you a roadmap of where you want to head. And the looking backward activity kind of gives you that foundation of the things that you want to make sure you include as you move towards that future state. And so between these two, what starts to bubble up is a general idea and a direction for moving towards your calling. Now, I truly believe that most of us don't just get handed our calling in one fell swoop. It's a process of discovery. It takes time, it
Mhm.
takes experimentation, but this at least gives you an inkling of the direction you might want to go.
That clarity is so refreshing. Like, we don't find our calling, it's more like we remember it, no?
Mhm. And you just kind of uncover it. I always think of it like you're uncovering layers in an onion, you're peeling it back layer by layer by layer. And the more you do that, the closer you get, but you never really arrive.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Now, as a certified human behavior consultant, how do you help people better understand themselves and how does that, shift their relationships and purpose?
So one of the things that I've been trained in is something called DISC, and it's a personality and communication tool that I use with people myself, and I've also taught other people to use. And one of the reasons I like DISC is not because it's perfect, not because it's the one be all system, but it's simple enough that I can kind of hold it in my head and I can use it in real time. And so that's one of the things I like about it because it's really authentic, it really works, but it's also easy. Because some of the other ones are so complicated, I can't remember them all while I'm talking to people. And so it doesn't, it's hard for me to use it in a real environment. So what DIS basically says is that people, there's two quadrants or two kind of up down axis and a left right axis that people are aligned on. And so the first one is the up down is that sometimes people are more outgoing and sometimes people are more reserved. Now, outgoing and reserved here does not mean introvert, extrovert. What outgoing means is somebody whose internal motor runs at high speed. So this is somebody who, when they get up in the morning, they're go, 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 go until they drop, into bed at night. Their motors going fast, they talk fast, they move fast, they're active. A reserved person is a little bit calmer. They tend to take a little bit longer. They tend to think about things a little longer. Their motor isn't going full speed all the time. They're a little calmer. They talk a little softer. They move a little slower. They're just calmer people in general. And people, again, it's not a pure, left, right, up, down kind of thing, but in general, some people are more reserved and some people are more outgoing. And then the left right axis is on the left is task oriented. These are people that go out into the world and think about what needs to be done. They tend to make lists, they tend to think about results, they tend to step out and look for the stuff that needs to get done. And then on the right hand side is people who are more people oriented. People oriented here means people that don't think about what needs to be done. They think more about who needs to be involved. Who are they going to talk to? Who are they going to engage? How are they going to bring people along? Are people going to be treated fairly? Are they going to be taken care of? These sorts of things tend to be their first primary thought. And again, none of these are good or bad. None of these are it's not like outgoing people are better or worse than the people that are reserved. It's simply different wiring. So if you think about that, you end up with four quadrants. In the upper left is the D. This is somebody who is outgoing and task oriented. These folks are direct. They tend to want to get results. They tend to be very quick thinkers. They tend to be very active people. They're often, this is the person that kind of jumps from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing and is just always, let's get it done, let's get it done, let's get it done. The next quadrant to the right is an I. So DISC is what we're going to spell disc. The I, this is people that are outgoing, but people oriented. These tend to be fun people. These tend to be people that are inspirational. They tend to be the folks that get out in front of the group and inspire everyone to action. They tend to be real quick. If, like, for instance, if somebody says, hey, you got a chance to get on stage, they're going to volunteer. These are the people that always kind of like to be in the center of the action. Moving down, you get to the S. So these are folks that are reserved and people oriented. The reserved people oriented people, the S's, they're supportive. They tend to be status quo driven. They tend to like things to be stable. They're the folks that are calm, collected. They're a lot about fairness. They don't like things to be, people to be treated badly. They're the nicest people on the planet. They're also the biggest group statistically. There's more people that are S's than anything else. And then the last one, the C, these are folks that are task oriented and reserved. Those folks tend to be about correctness. They tend to use systems, processes, steps. They tend to be driven by making sure that it's done right. It may take longer, but man, when it's done the right way. Now, everybody is a blend. Most people aren't just one of these. You're more than one of these. And in truth, what it is about understanding this makes you first understand how you're wired. So if you're a results oriented person, a D, you need to be understanding that when you're out there talking about results and moving and things, the other three groups of people don't necessarily think about the world the same way as you. And that's often why we get conflict and communication. And, the D is going, just go do it. And the C's down there going, I need a little bit more information. And the I is up there going, this, how are we going to involve the people? What are we going to do to, make sure everyone's motivated? And the S is going, hey, is everyone going to be taken care of? Is someone going to get hurt when we do this? We need to make sure that we've got this, we do this change in a way that works well and takes care of everybody. And the D's up there going, I just want you to go get it done. And they can't understand why these other three groups don't move along with them. And it's because they don't see the world the same way. So that allows you to begin to modify. And that's true, by the way, of all four groups. Again, none of these are good. None of these are bad. They just are. And then as you begin to understand that, it lets you then modify your action to be able to get other people to move along with you. So it helps you influence other people in a way that supports you and is authentic to who you are, but also treats them not the way you want to be treated, but the way they want to be treated. So they actually feel heard, they actually feel valued, and therefore they're more likely to actually themselves feel contentment and feel joy, and you get them on board. You're letting them have their wiring and their calling and their activities while still valuing your own. So everyone wins, and you actually end up getting much more success, much more joy, and able to live out authentically your own calling without that conflict and those fights that kind of erupt.
Self awareness is such a game changer, right? Like when we shift internally, everything around us follows.
Hmm. Absolutely. The first
Mhm.
step is always understanding. If you don't
Mm.
understand yourself and others, you're not aware. It's the old thing of what's the first step to fixing a problem? Being aware that there's a problem, because if you don't know there's a problem, you're not going to fix it because you don't see it as a problem. And so this isn't really about fixing problems, but it is about awareness of yourself and your own calling and your own wiring, and then awareness of others as well. So you can take that into consideration.
Absolutely. Now, your new book, Inspired Living, just launched, so congrats. So,
Thank
what
you.
was the most transformative chapter to write and why? You're warmly welcome.
Oh boy, the most challenging chapter to write. Probably, honestly, the most challenging one to write is in a lot of ways is kind of the last one, the conclusion and kind of the invitation to actually go out and live your calling. So the last two chapters are the call to live out your calling and kind of the invitation and conclusion. And the reason why is throughout it, I laid out kind of a framework, a process, a tool that you can use to kind of go through these areas of your life, your time, your talent, and your treasures, and begin to unpack some of those things like we were just talking about so that you can align yourself with it. And at the end of that, my worry is always that people will just read the book. You know, they'll get to the end of the book and they're like, "Oh, I've read the book. I've done the work." And the reality is throughout it there's exercises to do, and then that call at the end is to realize that even if you've done all the exercises, even if you've read all the book, even if you've done all the steps, you're not done, because there's constantly this kind of process of, refocusing on yourself, refocusing on what's going on, investing in yourself so that you begin to develop you, doing that internal work, and then investing in others or working with others and getting feedback. Through that, you develop influence and you make an impact. But it's not linear, because as you make an impact, as you develop influence, as influence others and work with others and work on yourself, what you usually discover is, hey, there's another level of that onion, there's another layer down there, and I've got to do this again. And so that call to realize that this is a constant process of discovery and uncovering and doing it again and again and again, and that's really what living your calling is. That's the invitation at the end. And my worry is always that, folks get to that and they don't realize that that's that invitation to kind of doing this to live what you really want to live.
Mm-hmm. Books like yours, they don't just teach, they translate purpose into action. That's really rare
The
and
goal.
real.
That is absolutely the goal, is not just to teach or inspire, but to actually create action for people. I work as a coach. I work with a lot of clients over the years in a lot of different countries. But at the end of the day, I only have so much time to reach people. And the goal was to hope that the book would reach some folks that maybe never heard of me personally, never worked with me personally, but still got some of those tools, those techniques, and those habits so that they could live out their calling. Because I truly believe the more people are out there actually authentically living their calling, the better the world would be.
Hmm. That's noteworthy. Now, let's get tangible. What's one tool or mindset shift listeners can take away today to start, mastering their time, talent, or treasure?
So I'll give you one for time, just because it's probably the one I've seen have the quickest change for people, and it's really just a
Hmm.
change in language. It's a change in a word that you use. And this works for money too, and I'll give you that kind of piece as well. But let me finish time first. So if you sit down and you think about it, what most of us do nowadays, busy is almost a badge of honor. People say, "How are you doing?" You go, "Oh, I'm busy," and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I get it. I'm busy too." Because busy is almost looked at as a good thing, when the reality is all busy means is I get a lot of stuff done. So that means if I would put a pile of rocks in my backyard and I spent all day picking up a rock, taking it to the other side of the yard, putting it down, and then when I run out of rocks, I pick them up from the second pile and I pull them back to the first pile and I set them down again. And I just did that all day long. I would be busy, but I don't think anyone would look at that and go, "Oh, that's productive. That's a good way to spend your day." That was a good thing to do. And in fact, most people would stop doing it pretty quickly, because it's like, why am I doing this? You don't have any purpose behind it. So here's the change in language. You are no longer allowed to say, I don't have time to do that. I've had people say things like, I don't have time to go to my daughter's soccer game. I don't have time to have date night with my wife. I don't have time to start that new business idea that I wanted to start. I don't have time is kind of put out there. And when people hear you say that, they almost are sympathetic. Oh, I understand. You just don't have time to do that thing. The change is to stop saying I don't have time and start saying that's not a priority for me. It's not a priority for me to start my new business. It's not a priority for me to have date night with my wife. It's not a priority for me to make it to my daughter's soccer game. All of a sudden, when you say that out loud, if you were to say that to your friend or even just in your own head to yourself, it feels different. I don't have time almost feels like it's just, oh, poor you. It's not a priority for me makes you kind of sound like a jerk if you say it's not a priority for me to make it to date night with my wife. Your wife would look at you and be like, really? I'm not a priority to you? It doesn't feel the same way. And as you reframe it and say it that way, all of a sudden you'll start making different decisions. You'll start rearranging your day so those things that actually should be and are a priority for you, those things start to get done. And what drops off or doesn't get done are truly the things that you don't care as much about. It's okay that they drop off your list because they're not as important as the things that you said are a priority. You do the same thing with money. That's really all a budget is sitting down with your money ahead of time and going, hey, if I only had $1, where would I spend that dollar? What if I had $2? What if I had $3? What if I had $1,000? Where would I put the money that's coming in so it's actually aligned with the things that are the most important to me? And when you start doing those exercises and changing your language from a look at lack or a look of not having something, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, to flipping it and going, no, where would the first thing go? What's the most important thing? What's the true priority? You start to make different decisions with your time or with your money.
That's a mic drop moment, Scott. Thank you for reminding us that our lives aren't puzzles missing pieces, they just need rearranging. And to everyone listening, your time is precious, your talents are divine, and your treasures are more than money. They are moments. Use them well. Until next time, stay intentional, stay aligned, and keep building a life that feels like yours.